Happy holidays and welcome to the final show of 2022. We got a lot to talk about. Roll it, Kyle. I'm telling you, 2022 got out of here like it owed us money. But here it is, the last week of the year, the last show of the year, and I could not think of a better discussion to have tonight. First, talking about the direction of our great city and parish, and then we'll talk about an incident that took place earlier this week here in Baton Rouge that is really symbolic of something that's been happening across our city for some time right now. So we'll begin with Mayor Pro Temp, Lamont Cole, Mayor President one day. He's a representative for District 7. And before we get into what took place at Triple S, I kind of want to, first of all, happy holidays to you, brother.
Same to you. Same to you. Thanks for having me.
I want to talk about what your grade for 2022 is for our city and parish.
Well, you know, when you ask me about grade, you got to keep in mind I'm an educator, so I'm a grade on a curve in terms of where we are, where we came from, and what we are seeking to accomplish here in the city. So I would give the city as a whole a B- in terms of homicides and murders having gone down, domestic violence issues having gone down. So that was the issue coming out of 22 we were concerned about. When we look at education, our schools overall coming out of the pandemic did a much better job this year than they did in 21. And so I think that's an improvement. And so when a city is consistently improving in the areas that matter most, we have to think about how do we grade that based on where we're coming from. We were to look at it overall in totality in comparison to other cities, that grade might be something different. But when we base it against ourselves coming out of 21, I would say a B- because we have a lot of work to do. But when we think about so many organizations here in our city who showed compassion, who showed love, who showed concern in various different areas of weakness here in the city, then I think we did a good job. I think what we cannot ever forget is that the most important thing is to show love and to exercise the best of the human spirit, and I think we saw that in 22.
What was the biggest win in 2022 so far?
For me, in particular, in terms of what we tried to do, increasing how minorities and black folk in this city are able to participate in city contracting, we stood up the Office of Supplier Diversity. We worked on that for a long time at the previous council in terms of doing a disparity study. Coming out of that, we learned some of the contracts were less than 4% going to minority businesses and things of that nature. And so as a result of some appointments in 22, when we think about Ted James being appointed to the SBA regional director, and we think about Don Cravens becoming the undersecretary of the Office of Minority and Business Development, Commerce,
Ron
Gath being appointed, we had some appointments that put black folk in position to really be able to help those who need to support the most. So I think those were the biggest wins and put us on a trajectory to do some good things.
Biggest loss?
The biggest loss we've had this year is the murders. You know, we have far too many.
And it's gone down, and it's still been a problem.
It's gone down, and it's still a problem, still a challenge, but that's the biggest loss. Anytime we lose our lives in this city for senseless reasons, it's a huge loss. So loss of life is always, for me, the biggest loss in any year where we have deaths. You know, my goal would be to have a year where no one passes away as a result of violence.
You know, when you were appointed as Mayor Pro Tem, there was this feeling that you would be able to get both sides to at least be civil in discussing some of the civil things. And I think you've accomplished that, man. But politics as a whole has become so toxic, where the argument is really the show. The solutions seem to not necessarily be top priority. For your city council that you lead, where could you improve, and what did you improve upon in this new year?
Listen, coming out of the previous council, where there was a lot of arguing, a lot of bickering, there was never any agreement in terms of solutions relative to some of the ills in our community, we have done a much better job. So hats off to the other 11 members of the city council. We have done an outstanding job, I think, of working together to solve issues. We have done an outstanding job of compromising on issues that were of extreme challenge and extreme controversy. One of the biggest issues we had where we weren't able to reach a compromise was when we did the redistricting, right? That we weren't able to reach a compromise, but for obvious reasons, because that would have meant, someone on the other side would have had to agree to take themselves out of the picture. And so we weren't able to come to an agreement on that, but, we agreed on a number of other things of significance here in the city. We have good conversations, very robust conversation. And I'm happy to say during the 2 years where I have sat in the Mayor Pro Temp seat, it hadn't been a circus, so to speak.
No, I agree, man. We've had some interesting council meetings
Right,
over
this
the years.
2016 to 2020, man, it was some crazy stuff taking place. And all of those individuals were good people as well, but I think the way we came to interact with each other, I think the way we came to interact with each other at times were challenging. But with this particular council, we've been able to have the tough conversations behind closed doors, remain civil. And as I always remind them, I send a memo out every week before every council meeting, and I remind them every week, remember, what we do is a representation of this city parish.
Hold your thought. I got to take a quick commercial break. We'll come back with Councilman Cole, and we'll talk about what took place at AAAS. Back in just a moment. So I want to get to what took place at the AAAS, but before I can't move away from this without asking. So there has been focus on North Baton Rouge, and rightfully so. And the logic obviously is if you impact positively the parts of your community that are in most need of attention, it helps the community as a whole, right? It's not dividing, it's saying let's deal with the area that most needs attention. We have all this money here now, federal dollars for a number of things, infrastructure, expansion, economic development. Why is it so hard to get a grocery store in North Baton Rouge?
Well, I think we hadn't exercised all of the opportunity and avenues we have to establish a grocery store. I think one of the easiest ways to do that is we reached out to some of the big chain grocery stores instead of trying to build and establish a grocery store chain here in the city of our own, and working with a developer or working with a small business owner or even a larger business owner who wants to seek and do that. Why not be an enterprise ourselves and create our own brand here in the city of Baton Rouge, the Red Stick grocery store chain, correct? And then we open the first one in North Baton Rouge, and then we work with someone who's worked in that industry for a long time, and then give them the resources they need and give them the financial backing they need, and work with banks to make sure they have what they need in order to do that, and establish the first grocery store chain started by, worked with private public partnership here in the city of Baton Rouge, and then we do that ourselves.
Didn't you tell me about a model for that some time ago when we were on the podcast? We talked about that.
I did.
Where was that?
That actually took place in Seattle.
Okay.
Where those folks there decided they wanted to open their own grocery store, if I remember correctly. And so it was a chain that they established working together with the community. It was a public-private partnership. I think we should approach it from that perspective. Look at the most needy area in North Baton Rouge, the largest food desert in terms of the radius and where for access to fresh food exists, and then perhaps put our own grocery store there that is owned by the city in a public-private partnership, a private business developer, and then we go from there, and then we start one, and then we work our way to start there. And I'm talking about something really nice.
Sure.
Fresh produce, fresh food, perhaps do a partnership where you can teach classes and teach food class and healthy living and things of that nature, healthy lifestyles. So I think that's an approach we perhaps should look at.
Got to be innovative.
Gotta be.
So you made me aware first about what took place at AAAS on the 26th. It had not yet hit the media. Obviously, it's been all over the media as of late, and many people have seen the video. How did you become aware of that incident?
Believe it or not, I grew up in that community.
Yeah.
And so, I still represent the area. And so many of my former students contact me when things like this take place. So one of my former students sent me the video. And so immediately my first phone call, I sent Mayor Broom a text, and I said, hey, we need to be aware of this. This is, unfortunate and it's unacceptable. We need to think about how we're going to get the individual, not the person who did it, the victim.
Right.
Let's get that person some
Help
support.
first.
Let's find out, identify who that person is. And so she agreed. And believe it or not, working behind the scenes and not looking to talk about the moves that were being made, I reached out to Tonja Myles.
The great Tonja Myles, who's in the next segment.
Dr. Tonja Myles is what I call her. And and from there she took it and ran with it and made sure that the individual was able to get the resources she needed, get the help, get the medical attention, and then reached out to the chief of police, talked to him about how do we identify the individual, talk to the store owner, talk to him. He then fired the individual. And so I'm very pleased with the way the community stood up and said this wasn't right, and then worked extremely hard to provide resources, first A, for the victim, and then B, address the crime, because it is a crime. And then once that happened, I'm pleased but not satisfied, because anybody who is living in our community in that way and suffering, right, and in severe circumstances, we have to think about what we can do better in order to get them the help and support they need, so they don't have to live like that.
You remember earlier in the year there were discussions about arresting homeless people. The dumbest idea, you know, and
that was a tense conversation at the council.
I bet it was, because the idea was stupid. And it doesn't help fix the problem.
No, we can't police our way out of homelessness.
I won't even run on the tangent. You know, Tonja as a clinician is going to talk about the inside of it. I got about 90 seconds. As a community leader, an elected official, what can the city do going into next year to put a big dent in this issue?
Well, we just, our last council meeting, we just approved transitional housing in 2 different areas here in North Baton Rouge to help them with housing. And then the next thing we have to do is think about, a lot of the homeless folk find themselves in unfortunate circumstances, but they do have transferable skills they can be employed. So we have to think about putting them back to work. Prior to that, we have to think about getting them the mental support they need. You know, we have a lot of folks who are suffering from mental issues, and we think about how do we get them the support they need. So I think there we have to start with housing, make sure they're able to have somewhere to live. Then we have to talk about healthcare, get them the healthcare access and healthcare support they need. Talk about some of the mental instability they may be suffering from, or the PTSD they may be suffering from, get them the support they need, and then talk about those transferable, employable skills, and see if we can get them working again, working at a livable wage with generous benefits, and see if they can stand themselves up and begin the process of getting back to some sign of normalcy again.
You might end up being here next week, because Tonja and I are working on something for next week, so I might have to see if I can get time in your business.
Hey, I'm here whenever you need me, man. You call, I'm coming.
We're talking.
You called me this morning, I came.
We're talking to Tonja Myles next. Oh, we are graced with the presence of the great Tonja Myles here on the desk. My last guest of 2022. And what a great discussion we are about to have. So, obviously you are all aware of what took place at Triple S, and Councilman Cole, Mayor Pro Temp Cole, alluded to Tonja's involvement in there. You were really, and I said this on something on social media, the hero of the day. Now, I've known you a very long time. I know your heart for this community, but you know, how can I put this? You don't tolerate BS or drama. You like to get things done.
That's correct.
And I feel the same way.
Yes.
Because the longer we talk about a problem, the longer we take to get to the solution.
That part.
So let me ask you first, when did you hear about what took place to this lady at Triple S?
So yeah, I received a message via Facebook for me to view the video, and when I first saw it, I was kind of in disbelief and trying to figure out when all this happened. And then a couple of hours later, my phone started blowing up with community leaders, you know, saying, what are we going to do about this, and asking me what I thought was the best course of action. So when, you know, Gino called, Pro Temp Lamont Cole called, and so
And for the record, Gino McLaughlin.
Correct.
Yeah.
And so he was just like, what do we do? I know this is your space. And so I asked him to let me talk to her. So I did a brief screening and got some information. And from that information, then I was able to say what is the next course of action for her, which then I went to get her, do another assessment in person. Sweet lady, that's a whole nother story, the backstory of how she got to where she is, because that's the kind of stuff we're gonna have to talk about too, not just while she was there, but what got her to there. And so then I was able to do some other screening, get her the help that she needs, take her to the Bridge Center for Hope, and I can say right now she's getting the quality of help that she needs. So
2 things. I actually want you to talk about how she got there. I'd like to talk about the open holes in the fence that people, you know, fall through in a system that, whether they don't know about resources, they are sometimes served by subpar people who don't have an intention to help.
Sure.
and it exacerbates the problem because it takes a number that's this size and makes it this size.
Sure.
So let's talk about it.
Well, let's talk about it. So let's keep it real. For first of all, there's such a stigma when it comes to people who have a mental health diagnosis like me, and a person who's in recovery like me. I heard that you guys were talking about the killings, how many people have died due to gun violence. Well, that doubles when it comes to people who've died by overdose. That's somebody's child, and we'll cry for that.
Yeah.
But we won't cry for a person who just lost their life because they was trying to get high and not die. But that was somebody's child too.
Right.
So that's a stigma right there, because I know that when people say, "Well, that's just another addict," are you kidding me? And to be honest, I've been working in this field a long time, and a lot of clients that I serve are from the country club to the curbside.
Oh, it's no question.
So let me just be real. It affects
ain't just
everybody.
in the hood.
It is just not in the hood. But
That's
here's
right.
the other deal.
Yeah.
The other thing is that we do have a system that, because of an administration that happened many years ago, there's no long-term treatment for a person, like the young lady, to get the help that she needs. And that has to change. And we have to collectively come at the table, look and see where the gaps are, and then fill those gaps in. And look, we've made some inroads. We really have. But at the end of the day, we have to do better, because the system failed her. The system failed her, and there's truly some holes. There's an organization that's right here in this community that needs to be addressed, because they do this all the time, and they get paid a lot of money, and they treat people like trash. And we have the data and the information to prove it. And so we have to stop this. We have to make people accountable. And if a person has an issue with addiction or mental health, they should be treated just like any other person who has a healthcare diagnosis. And so we have to reduce the stigma, and we have to make sure that those systems are in place, are no longer in place. And here's the deal, we can change them. It's just a conversation and actually doing the work. They can be changed.
The catalyzing part of this whole thing was everyday people watching a human being be treated in a way that you wouldn't treat an animal.
Worse than a dog.
40-something degrees outside.
Yeah.
And water's thrown on her.
Yeah.
And that's what made people go, but that crap happens all the time.
It
You
happens
just
all
saw
the
it
time.
this time.
Yeah. You just saw it.
So how do we not let this moment, we got about a minute, we'll come back. How do we not let this moment go by the wayside? Everybody's in their feelings and emotions about it when it happens, and then a week goes by and it's like, yeah, I got something else to do.
Well, here's the deal. If people are really serious about, addressing this issue, then there are some things that they can do now. There are some things that are going to be happening in the future that they can do. So, the same momentum happened, how everybody rallied together, which was a beautiful thing. We're going to keep that going.
Right.
And so we just need people to show up, and that's all they need to do. If they show up, we got them, and we can help them do the rest.
So, we'll just tell you, I got 30, well, we'll take a quick break and come back, and we'll tell you something that I'm pretty comfortable saying that we're going to do next week, because you're a doer, so I'm not waiting on whether or not you're going to be hemming and hawing. You're a doer, so we're going to hit the streets. And I want to talk with Tonja about next year, too, and her goals for addressing not just this issue, but you referenced the fentanyl problem. You said it first this year at a press conference. First time I heard someone say this. People are trying to get high and not die, which has been an issue because it's been through the roof this year.
Yeah.
Murders have come down, but that is out of the box.
Yeah.
Back with Tonja in just a moment. So I referenced it, and we'll tell you about it now. It is our intention to have some kind of media event at the Triple S next week, and the intention is to talk about the resources. Here's why. A lot of people know about the homeless problem, but not everyone is even aware of all of the resources that are available. In fact, before we tape today's show, Tonja made me aware of some things that I didn't even know. So let's go right to that part. The fact that there are resources here, but people don't know about them, so they can't refer someone to getting assistance either at the Bridge Center or someplace else because they don't know. So let's talk about that.
Yeah, I'll take, Mr. Rogers said it best. Who are the people in your neighborhood? Well, what are the resources in your neighborhood? And that's where we're going to be intentional about getting that information out. I'm a military girl, so I believe that, we have to attack it from all different angles. And so one of the things that I'm excited that we're going to be doing more about is that really boots on the ground, taking the resources to where people need them the most. Look, we have too much data because everybody's doing research. Well, you know what? Let's do something with that research. Right now, Sonia Armstrong is doing some amazing work with data, and we actually are moved by the data because you cannot measure what you can't manage what you can't measure. So we're going to take that data, and then we'll be able to take the resources to where people are. If it's mostly food desert that you guys talked about, well, let's talk about that. If it's mental health, substance abuse, or it might be a one-stop shop or plethora of information. We'll be able to actually take that information to where the people are and then help them navigate through how do you do that? Because that's another thing. We think people, well, they should know. Well, you know, they really don't. And then we have to be culture sensitive. Look, for example, I was doing some information with a national organization and we were talking about messaging, and they were just saying, okay, where would people go? Where would we tell people to go if they wanted a welfare check? Well, what they were talking about, a welfare check, is actually when you can, if you think someone's in distress, you can call. But some people think, well, my welfare check means my welfare check. So even how we interface with people and the language, and then the other thing.
In other words, an actual physical check.
Right.
Versus checking on someone.
Right, but it's different because the language means different to different cultures.
That's exactly right.
So we have to be culture sensitive. But the other thing that you and I talked about was being more trauma informed, and even training organizations when you're going out to interface with people, how to be more trauma informed, because that will reduce judgment and stigma, and then people will be more in tune to, you know, we can ask them, what help do you need? Because at the end of the day, they're the best version of themselves, of knowing what their needs are, and then from there we can give them those resources and help them navigate.
Asking for help does not make a person weak.
No.
And
it makes them wise.
It makes them wise, and being tough and macho and bulletproof is only for television and movies.
Yeah.
Human beings are a machine that often needs maintenance.
Yeah.
And we have to be intentional about making people, look, I have children. If they ever need to talk or tell me something's wrong, I want to hear it.
Yeah.
I'm not, you know, there was that whole generation, you remember, we came up in it, suck it up.
You better not cry.
You better not cry.
Better not cry. And y'all got it bad. As a man or a black man, you cannot show your feelings.
Listen.
You got to suck it up. And then y'all grow up into be these amazing men, and then women were going, but you won't talk to me or cry.
Listen, life was an Oklahoma drill. If you don't know what that is, Google it. That's the thing. So I got a minute left. So why are you optimistic about 2023?
Well, I'm optimistic because I have to leave my house in it like I'm in victory every day. Now, I might come in, you know, when I come home, I might be crying and crawling. But at the end of the day, I believe that, you know, there's good human beings there. You know, you talked about human. We're all human. And people deserve the right to be happy and to be respected. And I believe that when we come together collective, like we've been talking about, and other folks, then we can really make a difference, because there's strength in numbers, and the day of the one-man show is over, and we have to work together and then stay in our lane. I can't do what you do, but you know, I can call you when I need your help, and vice versa. So those are the kind of things that I'm optimistic about, because we're having conversations thanks to people like you, thanks to your show where you bring stuff to the forefront and you make us think and talk. Now we're going to make people act.
She's so amazing. Listen, 2022 is done. Last thing I want to say to you for this year, hold your head up, keep going, no matter what, keep going. God bless every one of you. See you on the other side of the year. Happy New Year. We're making it to the other side. The Clay Young Show is back Friday with the first show of 2023. We're going to talk about an event meant to address homelessness in Baton Rouge and how you can get involved. Also, we're going to talk about the bowl game. Matt Moscona is going to be here in studio. I don't know what I'm thinking about. To talk about the LSU game and the NFL playoffs that are on the horizon. Go 49ers. It's the Clay Young Show Friday night, 7:30 p.m., replaying on Saturday.